everyone, welcome back to my channel, Sharon Cullen Art. Today I'm going to be doing another gouache painting. I am just loving gouache, so if you don't love gouache, you're welcome to go away. But I know many of you are waiting for watercolor, and I will come back to watercolor at some point. But, you know, I think that gouache is quickly becoming one of my favorite mediums to work in, and there is an art show coming up in September that I need to get a lot of paintings ready for, because at this point I 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, oh gosh, 11, 12. I've only got like a dozen paintings for, oh no, 15. There's probably 15, 16 paintings I have. I have no prints made, and I have a lot of work to do to get this stuff ready. So I'm going to do another gouache painting right now. Let me turn things around and you can watch me paint. Okay, so the other day I showed you this, and I said I wasn't going to paint it because I already did a curved tree, but I am just loving this picture. Found it on Google, so it's not anything that I would sell. I'm going to do it in my sketchbook. So I just love the way these trees are, with the green ivy growing on them and all the flowers on the hedges and this beautiful path. It's just so spring. It's just spring, and I need spring so badly. So we are going to go ahead and do this one today. So I'm going to go ahead again using my Jeece Finest Gouache. I will take these colors, my burnt umber, I want my purple because I always use purple, my black and white. I will probably need my burnt sienna and my yellow ochre as well. I'll use a red for my flowers, maybe 2 reds. So these are the colors that I have ready to go. Now you can use whatever you want. You really don't need a lot of colors. You can use a cyan blue, or ultramarine blue is fine, a rosy colored red, usually a cooler red, and your yellow. Primaries, this would be more of the primary blue that you would use. And I may use this blue for my sky with some white. So let me go ahead and put some colors out and we will get started. Hopefully my what you call it isn't focusing, isn't too far off. If it is, I'm gonna have to send my phone in and get a new one. Let me just get some colors down here. Get my yellow. There's gonna be a lot of green going on, so this won't be enough, but I like to start with just a little at first. I'm gonna use this blue. I got a little ultramarine on that corner. Oops, I bumped. I've got a new arm for my recording, my video recording, which hopefully will help stop the bouncing and all of that that's making somebody very, very ill. We don't want that. So I just want to make sure that I'm getting all of my spacing in correctly for my trees. This comes down like this. Now I'm going to go ahead and add some white to the blue because it just keeps drying darker and darker, which gouache does. The lighter colors will dry darker and the darkers can dry a little bit lighter, not a lot lighter, but now I'm going ahead. I just used up the rest of that blue paint, mixed some black and white into it to make a gray, and I used that paint just to put the tree trunks in, and you can do that. Now I'm putting the underside shadows in on these branches. Later, I'm going to see that my branches are off, and I'm going to start shifting things. So I'm putting all this in, not realizing yet how far off these branches are in order to keep my path going. Those ones on the bottom, the one that's like dipping down and coming up, and then the other one that comes up and down, those are way in the distance, but they do that. And then you see this little patch of a hole of a path going through the center of that, which is part of what drew me to this to begin with. The nice thing being with gouache is that you can cover all of this up if you make a mistake. Now you'll see here that my perspective gets way off on this, or I feel it does. And in order to get this to look like a path again by the end, I need to change where some of these branches go. So I will be scrubbing out some of this paint later and putting my sky color over it, etc. You'll see what happens. I'm just using a flat brush here. It's probably about 1/4 inch. I can't remember what size it was, but sizing on these brushes from company to company changes so dramatically. But I have a smaller flat going on here. And I'm just going ahead now, and I'm going to get the 2 main trees with the color in, and I'm adding some purple. I really like purple in my tree trunks in my shadowed area. Sometimes I'll use a bluey purple, sometimes I'll use more of a rose, but I'm using this violet here. I believe it's called mauve in the group, but it's really very purple. Now you're going to see me putting dark lines in next to these trees. I'm just doing that temporarily for my own sight line, because after a while all those tree trunks kind of blur together and I don't know which is which. So I'm putting those dark lines in just so that I can see where the tree trunks are, but those will disappear later. And there was a lot of kind of green moss growing on the trees, so I'm putting in purple. You'll see me put in greens, then you'll see me put in grays, and it'll go back and forth until I get the color that I feel is necessary for the moss growing on those trees. There's so much green on the trees. Then you got ivy, then you've got Spanish moss hanging down. There's just a lot going on. But when I first started painting landscapes, they used to intimidate me. I always wanted, my dream was to be able to paint a landscape someday. And at first I avoided them. They were so overwhelming. There was so much going on, especially a forest where you've got all these trees everywhere, and I didn't know what to separate out and what to leave, and then how do you get that perspective right, and how do you get all the leaves and the crud laying on the ground, and you know, it went on and on and on and on. So it intimidated me. So eventually then I'd start with a very clean landscape, something like mowed grass or a farm or something like that didn't have a lot going on. And eventually I started to get a little bit braver and a little bit braver, and things started to come together. I'm not a perfect painter. I don't think anybody is, but after a while, I thought, what am I afraid of? It's only paint on paper, so go for it, And if you want to practice landscapes, but you're afraid to, start with gouache, because you can cover it up, you can layer over it. There's another painting I just did recently. I'm editing this after doing another one, and I posted it over on Instagram. So if you don't follow me on Instagram, you should go over and follow me, and you'll see a lot more of what's going on with me. But I did this desert landscape. I had never done one before, but I got myself so hooked into the landscape that I wasn't paying attention to my layering of gouache, and I ended up putting down like full strength gouache and then trying to go over it with other paint, I kept lifting the color underneath. And we're talking orange, bright orange sunset with a heavy, deep olive green on top of it. And it was gorgeous. It was a gorgeous landscape, but I felt like I kind of butchered it. I did do a video on it. Maybe I'll post it, but it wasn't bad, but it wasn't my best work. So, or I may just do another one and do it again. But with gouache, you can keep going over it as long as you start with thinner layers underneath. Now you see how you can see through my green here? It's because I'm using watered down gouache. Doing the same, sorry about my hair being in the way here. I didn't realize the arm of my tripod is so far close to my head. But I watered all this down just to get rid of the white of the paper. Then I'm going to go over it again, but I can go a little thicker with my gouache and a little thicker with my gouache with each layer, and everything works out just fine. But if you use full strength right off the bat, then that's when you run into problems. Now my sky was pretty much full strength because the white that I put on top was full strength, and I shouldn't have done that. I should have just watered it down and kept it thinner because I'm going to have a lot of leaves and branches going over the top of this later. So, but you'll see how I change things up and make it work. It's really not that hard. Now, if it were watercolor, I would have had to scratch this painting because my branches end up so far off from what I thought I saw. And I had to change later. I wouldn't have been able to change any of it if it were watercolor because I couldn't have just scrubbed it out and then moved it over. You would have been able to see the branches still. So there are advantages to the gouache. And a lot of people email me or leave comments for me or whatever. And I want to try gouache, but I'm not sure if I'll like it and blah, blah, blah. If you buy this gouache that I'm using, Jeece Finest Gouache, their gouache is exceptional, and you will get 24 colors for under $20 now. It's really not expensive at all, and it goes a long way. Now, recently, I did accept a collaboration with them, so they do send me free gouache now. This is just recent, and I said that I would mention them or use it on camera like once every 6 months or something like that. It was all they asked for. And I said, sure. The only reason I said sure is because I like their gouache. If you go back in my gouache paintings, you'll hear me go on and on about Jeece Finest Gouache. And I was kind of a gouache snob. I use Holbein, I use Winsor & Newton, I use M. Graham. Those are 3 of my favorite gouaches. I love those gouaches. But this gouache is excellent. It's buttery. It's not chalky when it dries. Unlike some like Arteza gouache, do not care for that. I've got an entire box of 60 tubes. I may give them to my great niece, but they're very chalky to me, and they dry too quickly. When you're working with it, it's like you run the brush across the paper and it like dries instantly. You do not want gouache that does that. Gouache does dry fast, but it should not dry that fast. This Jeece Finest does not dry that fast. It dries like regular artist's gouache. It's very, very good and very worth that price. It used to be more expensive. I think they started out at $27 or $29. Then it was down to $24. And now it's down to like 19 something on Amazon. Very, very inexpensive, but it's excellent. So if you want to get started in gouache, buy that gouache. I think these people live in Australia, but they do go through Amazon, so you get it very quickly. You'll get it in a couple days if you order it. So I do recommend it. I don't know if you've noticed, sometimes I just wipe my brush off on that towel to the left. I don't even rinse my brush. If I want the gouache to be thicker, I'll just go right in and get the gouache. Now I'm layering over another layer, so I want it to be a little bit thicker. So that's what I was doing, was just drying my brush off. I don't want to wet it, and you don't really necessarily need to keep cleaning your brush. You can just wipe it and then go into another color, unless it's dramatic, like you got purple and you need to go into yellow or something like that, But here I just keep adding color to that one area and mixing it up and changing it up, and I just use up all the paint that way. Every now and then you may need to spray a little bit of water on your gouache just to keep it moist. I stopped painting for a while. I was getting disgusted with my painting, and I shut off the camera and I went ahead and did my heart practicing, and then I came back again a little more motivated, and this is where I will finally figure out why I'm struggling, and it's because of the branches. So you'll see me change that up here in a little bit. And now I'm going ahead with the hedge row that's on the right hand side, just dropping in some color to add leaves. I don't want to cover this completely because I want some of that golden green to kind of show through in some areas and then not in others. So I'm just kind of dropping little bits of paint here and there. And you don't have to put every single leaf in on a painting unless you're doing a hyper realistic type of painting. But to me, I don't get it. I mean, it's really interesting to see, but take a photo, you know? I don't get it. So I've got more of an impressionistic approach to my painting style. I would say it's like a realistic impressionist style. So it's very different, but I'm going to have to go in a little bit here and add some darkness in the underside areas of these bushes. So I'll be grabbing some of the ultramarine blue, and then I decide to use some black, and that really helps to darken things up. Now here on the left, I'm putting in grass. I'm just getting the first bits of the grass to go in, and I'll be going over that a lot as well with different layers. I'm taking some white and mixing in just a bit of burnt sienna, and I want to get my first layer of ground cover that's on the ground, the leaves. I'm just kind of poking them in here and there with my brush, just dropping it in, and I just kind of layer and add color over this, and it gives the impression of leaves laying on the ground. As you saw, I had a darker, pretty much full strength, well, it was watered down, but burnt sienna underneath in my underpainting. And now I'm going in with lighter burnt sienna mixed with white. Then I can go in a little bit later and I'll add more full strength burnt sienna into that. And it does give it a leafy look, like a bunch of debris on the ground. And then eventually I will put my blades of grass in, and they will cover some of those areas, but the grass isn't super deep, so it's not going to do that a lot. Now I've added a little bit of yellow ochre to that color, and it's changing it up a little more, and I'll just keep changing up these colors and dabbing them here and there, leaving some of the color underneath to show through. And now here, a little more darker burnt sienna is being added in. Now I'm adding like a muted brownish gray in the debris area to make it look more like leaves. And you can see how adding these different colors kind of tricks the eye. You're seeing it very close up right now, but when somebody's looking at it finished, right away their eye registers those as leaves, dried leaves all over the ground. You can add in twigs and sticks. I didn't bother with that. There's so much going on in this painting, it really didn't need it. So I just left it Plus, I didn't really see any, but like I said, it is so busy. You're busy looking at the trees and the ivy and the Spanish moss hanging down. Now here I'm just going ahead and putting in the Spanish moss. I'm mixing that blue that I used earlier, a little bit of green, and some white in order to get that Spanish moss. And then I'm just dragging my brush down. Now I'm going ahead in and I'm just putting in the blades of grass on the path. Now I'm going to go ahead and finish my tree trunks here, and I'll realize that my branches are in the wrong spot, and I'm going to start scrubbing out the green and the branch that's hanging down, and I'm going to be moving things around. So I'll scrub a little and then I'll let it dry. Now I'm going to realize I don't like that branch there either. So I'm going to start scrubbing over it again. And then I'll just fill it with sky color to cover everything up. But right now I'm just going over it with water on my brush and then dabbing it off. And that's pretty much what I'm doing. Now this is a Pentalic sketchbook, and the paper can take some scrubbing, but not a huge amount. This isn't a cotton sketchbook. So I'm going to let that dry for a bit and then I'll come back to it. Now I'm feeling much better about the way I'm doing it this time. But I still want to fix these lower branches, so I'm taking them out. I decided to leave that one out, I think. Yeah, because I wanted the path to be seen. This is the nice thing about painting, that you can change your composition. Your photograph stays the way it stays. I suppose they can change things too, but taking that lower branch out, it looked very cool in the photo, but it loses something in my painting, so removing it was the best thing to do. And I was just using a scrap paper here. I'm trying to figure out what I want to use for my Spanish moss, and I pulled out several different brushes, and I think I end up going with just a rigger. That brush was putting too wide a swatch of stuff down. It was good for a couple of them, but I couldn't do it for all of it, if that made sense. Now I'm adding in different values of green on the leaves to give them more depth. And now that the leaves are down, I can put in the rest of the Spanish moss. Now there are two colors of flowers in that photo. I'm kind of wishing I had skipped it or just put a couple down like that and left it at that, because it becomes too much, I think. If you like this video, don't forget to hit the like button. And if you're not subscribed, hit the subscribe, hit the notification bell, and you won't miss any of my future videos. And in the meantime, everybody, remember, be courageous, paint with wild abandon, and most of all, be kind to each other. Take care. God bless you.